Assalamualaikum. We are Camaraderie from section 2. We will present about decision science in Islamic perspective. These are the group members consist of Fatin Nur Umairah, Nur Jannah, Nur Hanan Safia, Nurin Farida, Nur Syafiqah and Aisyah Nur Iman. Quranic perspective on decision analysis. The Quranic verse that relate to decision analysis is Surah Al-Ankabut verse 64. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وما هذه الحياة الدنيا إلا لهو ولعب وإن الدار الآخرة لهي الحيوان لو كانوا يعلمون. That means this worldly life is no more than play and amusement, but the hereafter is indeed the real life if only they knew. Meaning of Surah Al-Ankabut verse 64 and the relation. In analyzing a decision, Muslims must consider the long-term view, which is the effect in the hereafter. Dunya is not a real world, but hereafter is. They also need to realize that dunya is only a temporary, but akhirat is permanent. Hence, the Muslims that realize will use their time in the world wisely by obeying the commands of Allah and abandoning His prohibitions. For example, they perform salah, do good deeds, and other. Hence, they use their time in the world to collect rewards as a preparation in the afterlife. On the contrary, those people that act like this world is a real world, they prioritize worldly matters by pursuing achievements in this world rather than the hereafter. For example, studying to the point that abandoning salah, hence they will get sins and punishment in the afterlife. To conclude, the life in the hereafter is eternal and will be determined by all the deeds that humans do during their life in this world, whether good or bad. Muslims should carefully analyze the decision by considering the long-term effect in the hereafter.
Decision analysis is a structured approach to decision making that involves evaluate different alternatives and their potential outcomes, which consider the risks, benefits, and uncertainties involved. It typically utilizes tools like decision trees and payoff matrix. So a decision tree helps map out possible decisions and their respective outcomes, which provide a visual representation of the decision-making process. A payoff matrix compares the potential outcomes of each alternative, which allow decision makers to evaluate their choices based on expected benefits or costs. So this technique is useful in complex situations where multiple factors need to be considered before arriving at a decision, such as in business or personal choices. So by applying this method, one can make informed decisions that maximize positive results and minimize risks, which align with the Quranic principle of consult others and rely on Allah after making a decision.
Now, we will discuss how Surah Al-Ankabut verse 64 underline the concept of decision analysis. First point, evaluating alternatives and their outcomes. From Tafsir Insights, the verse indirectly presents two alternatives to consciously analyze choice and results before acting. First choice, use your life to gain eternal reward through salah, good deeds, enjoying goods and forbidding evils. Second choice, waste your life in pursuit of worldly pleasure and face punishment in the afterlife. It's linked with decision analysis, where identifying all possible alternatives and forecasting their respective outcomes. For example, the believer acts like a decision analysis, looking at both paths and choosing the one with greater benefits, akhirah rewards, even if it demands short-term sacrifice. Second point, risk and uncertainty management. From Tafsir Insight, this was warning those who pursue only dunya may face loss in the hereafter, which is uncertain in timing but certain in its arrival and passing process. Decision analysis involves assessing the risk associated with each alternative. A wise person avoids high-risk choice and leans toward lower risk and high-reward outcomes. For example, failing to pray may offer short-term gains, which is more study time, but carries long-term spiritual risk. This verse emphasizes understanding and mitigating such risks. Last point, long-term perspective and gains. From Tafsir Insight, the verse remind believers the worldly life is temporary, while the hereafter is eternal. Hence, a Muslim must weigh each action for its akhirah impacts. It's linked with decision analysis, where one of the core concepts is evaluating options, not just for their immediate outcomes, but for their long-term effects. For instance, a student decides whether to play on time or delay it for studies. Decision analysis would encourage them to factor in long-term spiritual costs of missing salah. Let's take a look into the illustration to understand better. I will explain 5 steps of decision analysis using one side of it, which is decision making under risk with probabilities using expected value method. Step 1, identify problem. A company must decide whether to launch a new product, improve an existing product, or do nothing. Move to step 2, 3, and 4, determine alternative solution, criteria for evaluating alternatives, and evaluate alternatives. We can illustrate it using decision table or decision tree. For the first column, we have launch a new product, improve existing product, and do nothing that represent decision alternative solutions. For the first row, have high market response, moderate market response, and low market response that represent state of nature with each probabilities 30%, 50%, and 20%. In the center of the table, we have expected come out or payoff. For example, launch new product gives profit 5 million on the high market response, 2 million on the moderate, and lost 1 million on the low market response. On the last column, we have expected value that we multiply the possibilities with the payoff. For example, 0.3 times 5 million plus 0.5 times 2 plus 0.2 times minus 1 equal to average expected payoff 2.3 million. Same goes to improve existing product and do nothing that equal to 1.4 million and minus 0.65 million. This is how we illustrate decision analysis problem using decision tree. Last step, we should choose an alternative. The company should launch new product as it has best average expected payoff or expected value, which is 2.3 million that we calculate before. Under expected value method, we should choose the best payoff as our current objective is maximizing profit.
So, Assalamualaikum everyone. So, let's start with the verse from Surah Al-An'am, verse 141. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Kulu min thamarihi idha athmara wa atu haqqahu yawma hasadih wa la tusrifu innahu la yuhibbul musrifin. And do not waste resources. Indeed, he does not like the wasteful. This verse teach us that to be careful with how we use what we have, like time, money, or resources. Islam always encourage us to avoid waste. Next slide is the tafsir and the asbabun nuzul of this Surah Al-An'am. Ibn Kathir explained that this verse was revealed when people were told to give charity from their crops. Some gave too much just to show off, while others were careless with what they had. So the key message is that don't waste and don't overdo it. Islam teaches us to find balance and use our resources wisely, which is very similar to what we do in linear programming.
Moving on to a technique description of linear programming. The definition is linear programming is a mathematical method used to find the best outcome, like maximum profit or minimum cost, in a situation where our resources are limited. So it is basically for us to plan and make relevant decisions based on what resources we have. The key concepts are objective function. This is what we want to maximize or minimize. And then decision variables, which are the values that we want to solve. For example, like X is for a unit products of A and Y is unit products of B. And then the third one is constraints. These are limitations or requirements that we have to include, for example, like labor, working hours, or number of materials. And then the fourth one is feasible region, which we can find in the graph where constraints are overlapped. And the last one is optimal solution, which we can find from the points within the feasible region, and which from that point which are the best solutions. And we have assumptions for linear programming. The first one is certainty, where objective functions and constraints are identified. And proportionality, the second one is proportionality, which if there's a change in one variable, the other variable will also change. And then additivity, which means that total contribution will be the sum of the individual contributions that we solve. And the fourth one is divisibility, which means variables can be in any form of numbers and not just whole numbers. For example, like in decimals or in fractions. And then the last one is non-negativity. So the decision variables must be in zero and positive numbers, and it cannot be in negative. And then there are 5 methods used under linear programming. The first one is graphical. Second one is sensitivity analysis. And then simplex methods, which are widely used. And then transportation and assignment.
The next part is how we support the underlying concept. The first one is optimal use of resources. The command of eat of its fruits when it yields, that implies timely and efficient consumption, not hoarding or premature use. So this refers to linear programming seek to allocate inputs in a way that ensure maximum benefit or output with minimal waste. Second point is resource allocation with constraint, which is zakat. The instruction to give its due on the day of harvest sets a constraint on how resources must be distributed. Some of the portion must go to the others, which is zakat. In linear programming also, constraints like resource limits or social obligation guide the solution space. The last point is avoidance of waste. which is not overuse of resources. The prohibition, "do not be wasteful," aligns directly with linear programming goals, efficient and sustainable resource usage. Linear programming avoids inefficiency such as overproduction, surplus, or unused capacities, all of which are forms of Islam, which is waste.
For example, we have a farm that grows wheat and corn. They want to make the most profit, but they only have a limited of land and labor. We created a mathematical model using linear programming and found 4 possible points that meet all the rules and constraints. First step is that we identify decision variables, where in this case is x1 and x2 is the units of wheat and units of corn. We find the objective function and subject to what? Subject to constraints. So in this case, it's actually to maximize profit, which is maximize Z, 5x1 plus 4x2, subject to constraint that we have. The next step is graph the constraints. And the first step is identify a feasible region. Last step is substitute each point into the objective functions and find the corner points of the feasible region. After checking each points, we found that the best result comes when the farm grows about 26.67 and also 6.67. That gives the highest profit around 160.03. So the solution helps farms make smart decision without wasting anything, just like the verse from the Quran teaches us. So I think that's all from my part. Thank you.